Robert?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, before we get started, I want to let you know I have another engagement right at noon, although I can be a little bit late. So I'm hoping we can wrap this meeting up by noon.
Well, you know what the mayor of Morro Bay said? The guy that's talking is making the meeting last longer.
There you go.
Bill Yates.
Well, I asked Brooks a lot of questions yesterday, so.
Yeah, I talked to him this morning. Thank you. So I'm seeing 11 o'clock and it looks like everybody's here. So I will call the meeting to order. And Cheryl, if you'll do the roll call, please.
Absolutely. Mr. Bourbeau?
Here.
Mr. Storton?
Here.
And Mr. Enns?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Cheryl. And with that, I'll ask Brooks to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, and the rest of us can mute and follow along. Thank you.
Sure. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning, Jeff.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning, Jeff.
Good morning. Good morning.
There we go. I was having trouble finding, but thank you for putting up the words to the Pledge of Allegiance, just in case any of us forgot. Thank you, Brooks.
Good habit.
Just teasing. With that, I'll open the meeting to public comment for matters not on the agenda. And Barbara, are you going to be our contact for public comment?
Actually, Patty's going to take that over. She
Okay.
wanted a little bit of practice today.
Okay.
So at this
Okay,
point in
Patty.
time, if a member of the public would like or is interested in making public comment, please select the raised hand button found at the bottom of your screen. Or if you're on a phone, please press *9. And it looks like I have one hand up so far. Okay, Janine Rands, you should be able to speak.
Hi, good morning. I am calling in, this is Janine Rands, calling in to comment about several items that I didn't see on the agenda. All of us are eager to hear when the public can expect enforcement to go into place on the polystyrene ordinance. And second, and maybe you're going to reply to that. And second is blue bin misuse in my neighborhood, which is the Meadows development across from Trader Joe's on Higuera. The neighbors consistently have, or one neighbor consistently has plastic bags with mixed trash, literally trash, in the blue bin. And last night, and picked up this morning, was so full, it was the bin of, or the plastic bag of trash was right on top where the lid couldn't be closed. So I reported this particular house to Patty about a year ago, and nothing has changed. The family has actually, I think, 3 children in elementary school. And if they're listening, they've all had that education lecture in their classrooms about recycling. Also, so that, you know, education isn't reaching the parents. This particular family man has a civil engineering firm downtown, SLO. So he should be educated about all these things, but it isn't translating to practice at home. Also, noting that most of our blue bins in our neighborhood do not have an educational sticker on them. So again, probably 3/4 of our people do not carry a newspaper. Most people do not do Facebook. And I believe that 90% of those folks abusing their bins are not getting, they're not getting the message. And I've received some of the printout in our, like, did it come in either the mail or whatever? I've seen people pick up their mail and go to their blue bin and just put in anything that wasn't regular, not even looking at it. And I've talked to friends that do that. They say they can't even bring it in the house. So I'm concerned that, the message of blue bins and trash in general isn't reaching the public. So those are my issues or my comments for today. Look forward to your comments. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Janine. Patty, do we have anyone else?
At this point in time, I do not show anyone else who wants to speak.
Very good. Then with that, we'll go to item number 5, Executive Director's Report. Brooks.
Thank you, sir. I'll try to move quickly since we are trying to get done before noon. The expenses are on page 47 to 51 of the packet if you have any questions. We did mention last month that we asked the haulers to give us data from their billing, and they did give that to us. So it was another way to model our estimates for the revenue. The Morro Bay HHW site agreement has gone through, so we have a 2-year extension with that, and it will be added to the agenda. Do we need to make a motion for that? I should ask, since it's not
Science
included in
discovery,
this packet.
2 additional staff. That's so ridiculous.
Oops.
IWMA programming, they're going to hire 2 new staff. Science discovery, 2 additional staff.
Patty, can you mute
Jesus.
the caller?
I think that did it, Brooks.
Okay. My question was the Morro Bay HHW site usage agreement. Does that we have to make a motion to put this on the agenda?
To put it, I think you can just determine to put that on the regular board meeting. I think that's going to the regular board meeting consent agenda.
Okay.
Yeah,
Right.
with the agreement of the executive committee, of course.
It's on there now. It's item
Yeah.
number 3.
So we're
We'll
fine.
cover it.
Okay. And Science Discovery added 2 more employees to help with the SB 1383 rollout. I think they're especially going to be focused on the multifamily units that have not had the service before. IWMA staffing, the 2 positions that were approved last month have been posted, and interviews are already scheduled the next couple of Fridays. Kelly's on top of that as the program manager. SLO County added to their agenda a discussion, or this, I understand, a discussion of the implications for them leaving the JPA. And the polystyrene letter that was requested, we get the cost estimate of sending that out to all affected businesses, and that was $3,100. I do want to take just another minute to discuss the franchise term sheet. So the idea here was that we would develop one set of terms that all the jurisdictions would be able to use with all of their franchise agreements. And again, there are over 20 of these. And the whole idea here is just to help speed up the process so that we can meet the budget and timelines. And then we would ultimately end up with consistent uniform agreements, and they would align with 1383 and the new terminology and definitions. And we did add into there some best practices regarding agreements or franchise collection agreements. So we gave those out we shared it with the haulers first in February, and then we met with the public works staff and legal staff of the jurisdictions in March. And then we've had follow-up meetings with both of those groups since then. So we're heading to the point where we'll be turning it over and looking at the individual franchise agreements for alignment. And then we were asked last meeting to discuss IWMA's education programs by one of the board members. So I was just going to have a couple slides for next week about our main focus is businesses. State passes laws, business doesn't even know they passed them. So we're filling in the gap for these local small businesses that don't have an environmental person to advise them and helping them develop compliance mechanisms. And the same thing with the education program. We are tailoring that to meet the state curriculum. We do over 30,000 students a year. The adult education has been having over 100 participants at each of these events. We've scheduled 22 during the year. And the total cost of that's $180,000. And then our website and phone inquiries still are heavily used. The website's getting 228,000 hits a year, or averaging over 6,000 hours of viewing. And then we've got this guide here at the bottom that shows what they're typically looking at. It's their number one hits or what they do. And I'm extremely glad that if you Google hazardous waste or recycling or solid waste in SLO County, IWMA will be the first hit, I believe, on your search bar. And then the rebranding effort, again, we have to want to line all of our flyers, residentially and commercially, and the multifamily to be one theme and not use IWMA, which is very confusing and doesn't even relate to waste. So this is where we are right now, is slow waste. And a couple of things that are unique to this, the W connotates that it's part of SLOW for slowing it. And then the word waste, we put in that we're regional and not just SLO city or SLO county centric. And we have our official title at the top, and then connecting the community waste solutions still at the bottom. We will change these hexagon shapes and the logo that's inside those, or the image that's inside, to match our colors that we have for the business labels and the residential labels. And I think the total cost of this is about $800. So this was really good value for the money. Any questions on any of those items so far?
Brooks,
I have a couple, Robert, when you're ready.
go ahead, Keith.
Thank you. First of all, the logo I really like. Thank you. Great job on that. I think it's attractive and it says what it needs to. I did have a question. You did mention that the county has agendized in the future the possibility of leaving the IWMA. I was just curious, what do we need to do on our end as the IWMA to have those discussions? And I think there needs to be a full understanding of that, what that would mean for all of us. And so is it something that we agendize in the future to have those discussions?
Brooks, did you want to, that was my question. Thank you, Keith. Brooks, did you want to comment?
Yeah, no, I guess I would like some direction from the executive committee on this. I do have a couple slides here regarding SB 1383 and the impact of that. And this was also brought up by one of the board members last month to discuss the timing. And so I was going to show these two slides. This is the main focus of the elements we have to put in: the franchise agreements, the ordinances, the procurement, edible food recovery programs, et cetera, and then the education component. And then I have, again, the cost of SB 1383. Again, it's $500,000 more if we would split up. And then based on the 42 programs that we have right now, I would estimate a 50% increase on those if you operate them in the same manner that we are currently doing. In other words, the same service level. The HHW sites are open 52 weeks a year. If that continues, I would estimate it to be a 50% increase. So I'm prepared to discuss these or bring these issues up. And behind the scenes, I'm trying to have continued discussions with the county and with other board members that we need to focus on staying together. But what else would you like to see?
Just Brooks, I was curious. They wanted to put this subject on the county agenda. What agenda is it on, and when would it come up?
Well, that's why I put, I think it's there because I was told it was, but I have not checked to see if it was yesterday or if it's coming up. But I can do that before Wednesday, definitely.
Okay, and then if it does come up, I'm assuming some of us would want to be there to speak. So maybe we need to strategize a little bit with the executive committee about, you know, what are each take part of a topic, and maybe see what we can do with it.
It was my understanding it would be a couple of months away because the county has to do an analysis of the departure So there's a lot to it. So I had heard, but I don't have anything to confirm the exact timing, but I don't think the presentation's going to take place for a couple of months unless somebody has any information different than I do.
Yeah, that would that would be my expectation as well, because I mean, as I understand it, Supervisor Pashong at the end of their last meeting, asked the staff to analyze it and to come back with something. And I would imagine it would take staff a while to do that. And that I'm not sure exactly when the county publishes their agenda, but there would certainly be a staff report that could be reviewed. And I would hope that they would kind of give Brooks a preview of that staff report. But in any case, there would at least be, a weekend and a few days for us to review whatever staff report comes along with that when it does arrive on the Board of Supervisors agenda.
And for me, Brooks, I appreciate the information you've put together. And I think maybe initially that's some good comment points right now, but really until there's actual full understanding of what it means for the JPA, because it's my understanding if the county did leave, that changes the JPA significantly and how we vote on items. And I mean, it sets in a mechanism that is probably much greater than probably any of us want to go through or experience. But
President Ans, if I might make a real quick comment.
Yes, go ahead, Jeff.
Just keep in mind, there are a lot of moving parts if the county does intend to withdraw. One of which is that the JPA would need to be revised because we cannot even have a meeting. We don't have a quorum without a member of the county on the board. That's a very simple example, but one of many complications. Of course, another complication which I will need to address, and it will be through discussion and I suppose negotiations with the county on this, is what is going to happen with the authorized districts. The authorized districts are not members of the JPA. They have a voting interest and a seat on the board through the memorandum of agreement. And so, but of course, the special districts have a different level of authority than they do as participants in the IWMA. So how do these programs continue, the existing programs? How do they continue to operate for these unincorporated areas within the county if the county is not a member of a JPA or the IWMA anymore? So Brooks and I have been in discussion on these issues. I have been receiving questions on those types of topics. So I think we're going to have to look at it as expect that there will be discussions and dialogue consistently through the process if the county goes in that direction.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Any other comments? Any other questions to Brooks for his report?
Can I make one more comment?
Please do.
The county manager did have a meeting and include me in it Friday a week ago. But the main point of discussion was if it was pulled back into the county, where would it fit within public works or environmental health? And then at that point, I discussed the implications of having to revise everybody's integrated waste management plan, which would be a significant effort, split up the funding sources through the landfills and the hauling, and bid in 1383 at the same time. And it was, again, everybody at the staff level knows it's a significant departure, and I don't think any of them is really in favor of it, but they're just doing what the board is telling them to do.
All right, thank you, Brooks.
Robert?
Yes, Charles?
I think, there's obviously a whole host of issues, things that Jeff and Brooks have already thought of, probably some things they haven't thought of that, as the county staff writes their report, I certainly hope they would coordinate, so that Brooks or Jeff could say, well, what about this? What about that? Have you considered this or that? So that their report to the board of supervisors could be more thorough. I don't think, we have to get into great detail about it here, but just that, they continue to work with the county staff, but also kind of sketch out in bullet points some of the things that the remaining members of the JPA in a hypothetical situation would have to consider if that came to pass.
Okay, thanks, Charles. Well, if the county decides to take over part of this or pull out, it's going to make a mess. So hopefully we can avoid the mess.
For sure, a very large mess, I think.
I think you're right. Any other comments or questions for Brooks?
Oh, Brooks, I did have one question. On the colored chart, matrix of the steps for implementing 1383, that one there. Now that we're into May, so we're several months into this, how are we doing on just in general on all of those items? Are we on track with what you expected, or are we falling behind in any areas?
Yeah, no, at this point, I think we're good.
Okay.
That critical one is 1.1, the franchise right here. And so this lighter green is the negotiation stakeholdering, and that's what we've been having. And like I said, we're now to the point of getting it back to the jurisdictions and helping them, actually negotiate and amend their franchise. So that's what's going to happen next.
Great. Thanks.
And that was the bulk of HF and H's money to help them go individually through the franchise agreements. And so that's going to be starting soon.
Thank you.
Good question, Charles. Thank you.
Robert, could I add one more thing, please?
Certainly, Keith.
Thank you very much. Just to get back to the issue with the county, I just want to make sure that we, as an IWMA, are communicating clearly at our meetings with the potential of what may happen. And Brooks, I don't know if you can include some comments at each of our meetings in your director's report. I don't want staff to take a whole lot of time on this, but I think there are some obvious things that are in front of us that we just have to prepare for and have discussions about. So we're not just at one meeting and the county's gone or whatever that looks like. But I just feel like we need to have some availability for discussion at each of our meetings on this topic, because it is critical. And I'm not sure of the best process to do that.
Or are you okay if I just add a slide to the PowerPoint for next Wednesday?
I'm fine with that if the board is fine with it as well. I just think we need to have these highlighted and discussed so we all understand what is going on.
Thank you, Keith. I agree. If we keep it highlighted on our agenda, then it always gives all 5 supervisors an opportunity to have a discussion with us, since they will be on the board, and it'll give them, technically we can call them out by saying, well, you're here, what's your opinion? And let them, force them to make a comment, even if it's no comment. So I think it's good to at least put it on the agenda, so it's always there and it does not go away.
And I'm always hopeful for some type of consensus as we have these discussions moving forward. And I think at least if we have it highlighted on our agenda, like Robert said, we can have those discussions.
Okay, I made a note of it and I'll have a slide on it for next week.
Very
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you. Good idea, Keith. If there are no more questions for Brooks, we'll go to the next item and I'll.
Oh, I'm sorry. And I did want to, part of the oral report, get to the budget.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Sorry. The whole idea here is not to belabor this. It might be tweaked between now and next month. So I'm not asking for final approval today or next week. It's just to review those incidental expenses or discretionary expenses that we can decide whether to put in the budget or not. So, but I'll just go through it real quick here. Again, we anticipate having almost 2 million carry forward, 1.5 of savings or reserve that I should say savings, reserves or restricted emergency funds that we can't touch. And so we would have 3.1 million of new revenue. But excluding the 1.5 million, we've had 5.1 million of total funds available, 3 million of expense. Again, 1 million is 1383, about 360,000 of capital, and total expenses of 4.5. But here's the big picture. In a normal year, we would spend about 2.5 million. And we know with 1383, we've got to spend another million. So that puts it to 3.5 million. If you throw in the one-time implementation costs and a few capital items, that's why we're at 4.5 for this 1 year. But if everything goes as we're projecting, we'll end up with still a $500,000 savings amount, which, considering we only have these 2 revenue sources and we have to plan well in advance, this is all conservative and I think reasonable. And what will happen is a year or 2 from now, if we see that we over projected on expenses or revenue, we can make an adjustment and ratchet it back. We just can't afford to run out of money. So then I think these slides were in your packet, and I think we've all discussed that. I'll just, again, go through this. The anticipated revenue I just mentioned, the anticipated expenses. These are the capital breakout of the forklift and foundation work for the building, and then the HHW site at San Miguel. And then so it's really 2 items that I'll be asking the board to really weigh in heavily next week. Are these capital expenses? Are they okay with having $200,000 for the building, the forklift, the HHW site, and then these discretionary expenses of additional tag grant funding, the county blue bag program, and seed funding for edible food recovery kits. We want to get about 20 of those out to different areas of the county. And they're about $500 each. That'll be an igloo cooler and hand dolly or hand truck or whatever to keep the food hot or cold till it gets to the food banks. And I included this cutout here of the blue bag program. And what I'll do is I'll itemize this of where they're saying they want the $150,000 to go. It does all relate to litter disposal or sharps collection. But of course, it doesn't tell us where and when it would be spent. And I know there's some concern about it being focused on the city of SLO or county and not all the jurisdictions. And then let me mention the rate increase and why the need for it. And I apologize that for some reason the packet, when we cut and pasted this, the month and year and the titles on the graph were not here, but I kind of made it a little more obvious here. So we start out with a healthy reserve of cash, but then as our expenses outpace our revenue, when we get to January to February, we would actually be at 0. And our only option would basically be to borrow money if we didn't do the rate increase, because we'll spend through the $500,000 emergency fund by May. So then we projected a rate increase in September, which we'd actually start getting money mid-October. And so the expenses, again, a lot of these are one-time. You have the SB 1383 one-time expenses, the capital expenses in there at this one point, early in the year. So, but it does level off by the end of the year, and we end up keeping our reserve at about $500,000. So I think these do a good job of explaining why and when we need the rate increase. We have been, Jeff's on top of the issue of whether the Prop 218 or Prop 26 affect us and how to affect us and the best way to navigate that. But we don't have the final answers at this point, but we are looking into it. And then the rate increase, again, you've all seen this idea before, but we're basically recommending that we go from 2% to 4%, recognizing that many of the customers are paying 30 cents a month and they're not subject to the 2% fee. We modeled this 3 different ways. We did get some data from the haulers. We did have the R3 study, which was based on years 2016, 17, 18. And then we pulled the 2019 census data. And all of those kind of hinted to that it was around $300,000. So this could be $300,000 higher if those models are correct. But again, if they're not correct, we're just getting by with a $500,000 cushion. So that's why we're recommending that we go with a full 2% to 4% and the $3 a ton to a $4 a ton. And that will get us $1 million a year additional revenue to fund 1383 long-term. And if these projections hold true, we're fine. And if they're over a little bit, then we can ratchet it back. And then we will, this will all have to be a rate resolution. Significant effort will be put into that, but we hope to have that back to you by June. And we are probably going to recommend that we implement a reserve policy where we have some amount of money, 20% or 30% or something of our total expenses we have at any given time on hand. So it goes back to the budget where everything, if we project as goes, we'll end up with a $500,000 savings and be okay. So any questions on the, and again, my main question for the board next week is on those discretionary expenses. Do they want the blue bag in there? Are they okay with the capital expenses being in there, et cetera? And the county is going to be on the call next week. So, okay, any questions about the budget?
I just had one, Brooks, or maybe Jeff, you can answer this, is do we have to do a 218 hearing to increase our rates?
I am looking into all those issues related to that. Because there's two different, there's the percentage increase and then there's the increase at the tipping fee increase, which is different from the rate increase. And so there are issues as to whether these are impact parcels. There's implications as to whether and how haulers might determine to pass through. My initial take was that it would appear to me could be incorporated in the haulers rate increase structure if they intend to pass it on. But I think the tipping fee may have to be addressed separately. So the short answer to the question, and I spoke with Rob Hilton yesterday to get a sense of how other communities have done it, and it appears it's kind of all over the map. We are in a bit of a unique situation. We don't have any customers ourselves as the IWMA. We have member agencies who have haulers, and as all of you know, the haulers typically will have a 218 to raise their rates, every other year or so. So the answer is I don't know yet, but I am actively working on it.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. I just wanted to be sure if we needed to address that it's on our agenda. Any other comments?
I have one just to follow up on that. I appreciate the question, Robert, because my question was, if we do have to have a 218 process, are we going to be able to make our timelines?
Well, it takes a couple months to do one of those. By about 3, I think. You have to have 3 meetings, I believe, so it'll take some time. So we need to be aware of that. Thank you, Keith.
Thank you.
Robert, yeah, my comment was along those lines. I think these are good things to put forward. I have a lot of questions about the blue bag thing, but I think we have the request from the county. It's important to put it before the full board. But along the lines of what Keith just talked about, we may also, as part of our full board discussion on the budget, consider deferring some expenses until we ensure the rate increase is passed, i.e., the money you're setting aside for the building foundation work, stuff like that. Plus, in that case, we were going to probably defer till our little committee on whether it would be better to sell and buy a new building anyway. But certain expenses we might want to defer until we ensure rate increases passed, even if we incorporate them in the budget itself.
Okay, thanks, Charles. Brooks, maybe you could remind us on the blue bag, county was requesting $150,000, but as I'm reading that, it sounds like they're putting in something in the millions from their budget, 10 million, I think they said. Is that correct? The county spends that kind of money dealing with the issue of really not the blue bag, but the homeless in general?
I was told by the county manager that it was an emphasis of the county supervisors to focus on homelessness. And I do believe that they're primarily using grant funds or state funds, but I'm not 100% certain of that.
Okay, because they said they were looking at 10.6 million for programs and projects to address homeless within the region. And then they go down and talk about county budget included approximately 157 million towards health and human services. So I was not clear exactly what they're contributing. And my recollection is that of the blue bag donors, we were requested to put in 150,000, and the next nearest person was something like 7,000. Am I recalling that correctly?
Yeah, that was on the
Central Coast Partners for Water Quality.
yes, thank you. I was going to say the water cleanup issue.
Oh, okay.
And we did not put that, we did not get another request for that, so that's not in this budget.
Okay, I just got confused between the two. Thank you. All right, any other questions for Brooks? Seeing
I should
none,
remind you, staff will be, county staff that prepared this item will be on the call next week. So you are free to ask. She will be very knowledgeable about what the county's doing.
okay, very good. Thank you, Brooks. With that, we'll go to the consent agenda, and I'll open that to public comment for items on the consent agenda.
So
Patty,
at this time, if a member of the public is interested in making a public comment, please select raise hand button found at the bottom of your screen. Or if you're on the phone, you may press *9. President Enns, I'm not seeing anyone at this time who is, no raised hands.
Okay, thank you, Patty. I'll close public comment on the consent agenda. And I just had a question here. The way this is indicates that we review and approve. I think we can approve the minutes of the executive committee meeting, but the board needs to approve the minutes of the board meeting. Is that correct, Jeff?
That's correct.
So
Um,
in this case, can we only approve item 6? And
Here.
then item 7 just goes as no action to the board
That's correct. It's just receive and file, Ms. President Enns.
on both of these?
No, the number 6 is to approve the draft minutes. Number 7 is to receive and file, and it will go on consent before the full board.
Okay, so we
So a
can't-
motion to approve the consent agenda is fine.
Okay,
I will move to approve consent agenda items 6 and 7.
thank you, Keith.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Charles. Any other comments or discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please, Cheryl.
Mr. Storton,
Yes.
Mr. Burbo,
Yes.
Mr. Enns,
Yes.
motion passes unanimously.
All right, thank you, Cheryl. With that, we'll go to the regular agenda matter, and public comment will be received on each item. And we'll go to item number 8, regular agenda for the IWMA for next Wednesday. And Brooks, you want to lead us through this?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Sorry, I forgot to change this title on this slide. But this is the regular agenda that you'd be approving. And corporate e-waste, that's our e-waste vendor. I guess what's happening here is the price of the heavy metals in the electronics has gone up. And so they're actually going to pay us more money. and it will offset the cost of disposal or the collection. And so I'm going to estimate that. I think that's between $3,000 and $4,000 a year that will save us. The county is our bank, and so they'll be serving that function again for $7,700. We are working on more outreach and education, especially on 1383. Movie theaters, we've been contacting them all, but these are the ones that have gotten back to Kelly so far. So we would get a 30-second spot that runs multiple times on multiple screens. And this is a huge discount based on COVID, and that we're doing it in multiple theaters, but we'll try to do more theaters. These are just the ones that have gotten back to us so far. Same thing on the billboards. This agreement is for 101 north to south, including slow. And so this is some of the renderings of where they would be along the highway. And then we will also focus on communities out towards the coast. But again, this is what we've got so far. And that's it on the consent agenda items. Any questions?
None from me.
I asked mine yesterday. Thank you.
Okay. So are there, Brooks, you want to go ahead with other items on the regular agenda, board agenda?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you. So Mr. Maroney wanted to give an update on the Knudsen case, and I believe he will discuss the DA as well. And rather than have my evaluation and have another closed session in June, I'm requesting that we just do it in May, so we do not have to go through the process of cutting people out of the Zoom and coming back and all that. Just do it at one time.
And to be clear on that, Jeff, did you send something out already on for board members to provide input, or did we just, okay?
I
Thought
did.
I saw something. Okay.
Yes.
And that went to all board members, right?
Yes, it did.
Okay,
Thank
are there any other board member comments on the packet for Wednesday?
I have none. Mine were answered already. Thanks.
Okay. Brooks, any other comments?
No, sir, I think that's it, but I'll just ask other staff, is there anything I've left out?
I think we just wanted to add that item on the county board agenda.
Yes, and I've made a note of that.
Okay, I think that's the only modification I've seen from the executive committee. So if there's nothing else, then we're done with item 8.
think we
Excuse me,
need to move
President
to-
Enns.
Oh, sorry.
Excuse me, President Enns, can we take public comment on item 8, please?
We can do public comment, and then we'll need a motion to approve to put it on the agenda for.
Okay, thank you.
At this time, if a member of the public is interested in making a public comment, please select the raise hand button found at the bottom of your screen, or if you're on the phone, you may press *9. Okay, Janine, you should be allowed to speak.
Yes, this is about number 8. The regular agenda is, I don't know, I find it confusing. The continuance of the polystyrene 2021 was voted down, but it's included here as, I don't know, it doesn't say that it was voted not, it was not approved. But I wanted to know that we're going to fully address that the polystyrene 2019 was passed. It didn't seem like that was made very clear here in these minutes. And then I did want to make a comment on the enforcement and when can the public expect that enforcement to happen? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Janine. Anyone else, Patty?
One moment. I see no other raised hands.
All right, thank you, Patty. Then I will close public comment and bring it back to the board for a motion.
Robert, I did mention to Brooks yesterday that I also, I did find the minutes not inaccurate in any way, but incomplete in the sense that the motion having a 7-6 vote was insufficient, due to the supermajority request and requirement. Therefore, the motion failed. Therefore, the ordinance in the original ordinance goes into effect. And while I don't think it's not absolutely necessary to be in the minutes, it might be a little more clear to include that, unless Jeff feels that wouldn't be appropriate.
I think it's appropriate to have the minutes reflect the way you desire, or you think is most appropriate. There's no rule on that.
Okay. I just think, yeah, the added comment that, the motion failed as a result of the supermajority requirement, and therefore the pre-existing ordinance that was suspended goes into effect.
Thank
Something
you,
like
Mr.
that.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Verbrow. I will correct the minutes to reflect that.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Charles.
Robert, could I add a question and comment, please?
Please do.
I just wanted to follow up on Janine's question, and just for clarity, and Brooks, maybe you can help me explain it better. Although we have ordinances in place, we do not have a mechanism that provides enforcement through the IWMA. I know Patty does as best she can to do outreach and education, and we try to keep people to comply, but we have no mechanism that forces any type of enforcement other than what is the process for the IWMA through Patty. If they can't get somebody to comply, would we notify the individual jurisdiction to follow up on that if they chose to enforce? Can you explain that just for clarity? Because when Patty calls and says, when does the enforcement begin? We don't have an enforcement mechanism that you control.
Well, Keith, not only that though, I'm confused because after, we voted the way we did, then Mr. Supervisor Gibson made the motion to basically not enforce for a while, but focus on education, et cetera. So it seems to me that at least for the time being, we are explicitly by motion focused on the education piece.
Right, which I would agree with too, which I believe did pass, that we
Yes.
would just go with that route anyway with the polystyrene. Janine had mentioned in public comment about the blue bin issue, but that's similar in the sense that it's somebody who's not complying. You do your best to make sure they comply through education, but as far as enforcement, there is basically none through the IWMA.
That's a hauler issue. I mean, putting the
Right.
wrong stuff in the wrong bin, contamination, is a hauler and local jurisdiction issue to begin with, not an IWMA ordinance.
I just wanted to make sure it was clear to Mrs. Rands when she called in that there are only certain measures that are in place that can be done directly through the IWMA. Otherwise, my question was, Brooks, if there is a continued violation, would that get referred to the individual community where perhaps there was an issue and they could choose to follow up on it?
That's my understanding, and Jeff, please jump in here. My understanding is if we would get to those so many attempts at educating and they refuse to comply, then it becomes a civil action. But
We would engage with the member agency. And I think keep in mind that this has never really been an issue. Voluntary compliance has been a cornerstone of the IWMA's exercise of authority and outreach and education efforts. So we've never, as far as I can recall, even through the plastic bag ban, which I think is probably the most controversial issue prior to this, had enforcement issues. So education and outreach have seemed to be extremely effective for the agency. But I do believe if we got to that point, we would engage the member agencies and try to work through it as best we could.
Great. No, I appreciate the explanation. I just want to make sure the caller's question is answered that.
Thank you.
But I appreciate that. Thank you. So I will, I'll move to approve our board meeting agenda for next week on May 12th, unless there's any other comments.
Well, I will second that with the addition of the item that we previously discussed.
Agreed.
Okay, the change in the minutes. Okay, with that.
Yeah.
If there's no other discussion, Cheryl, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Storton,
Yes.
Mr. Verbeau,
Yes.
and Mr. Enns.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. President Enns.
Okay, thank you very much. And with that, we'll go to item number 9, member comments and future agenda items.
I have nothing.
I have none. Thank you.
And usually we have an item that says adjourn, but I don't see that on here, so
You're going to have to stay, Charles.
we may.
Yeah. Well, you have to have a separate motion for adjournment, I guess.
But I think we can adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everyone, for being here.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
everybody.
Thank you. Appreciate
Bye-bye.
it.
Bye-bye.